Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Nathan Ross Rees Reformer Podcast. Today we've got Raph back again, the wise and wonderful Raph. He's bringing the heavy artillery destroying dogma in the Pilates industry, and it's always a pleasure to have you on, mate. Thanks for coming back.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Nathan.
Thank you. So I've been a massive fan of the posts you've been putting out lately, loving the content, loving the conversation with the camera and the evidence that you're bringing to kind of bring light to areas which have been kind of in the dark a little bit, just assumptions that we've all had that sound fine, that sound good, but in reality, this don't add up. So I did a little bit of a search back through probably the last 2 months of your content, and some of the topics today is almost like a highlight reel. I'd like to kind of cover some points and jump into a little bit more depth and nuance on those. One of the first ones I absolutely loved was when you're talking about strength training and the extra nuance that we can kind of bring to it now. Obviously, it's been a big buzzword in the community for a while, and everyone's kind of jumping on board, and everyone seems to have a different interpretation. But to kind of get more of an insight onto how you see it, that's something that I know that everyone listening is absolutely dying to learn more about. So, yeah.
Well, I think, I'm all in favour of anybody who tries to help their clients get stronger. I think that's awesome. And the reason I think that is awesome is because there's just a massive accumulation of evidence in the scientific literature now that it just helps people live better, healthier, longer lives. And so of all of the things that you could sell in business, like longer, happier, healthier lives, it's like there's not much, it doesn't get much better than that, you know. Yeah. This is like we're doing the Lord's work here. This is good stuff. So I think it's fantastic that anybody out there who's trying to help their clients get stronger, like go, you know, that's awesome. And so I think probably the two big points, and you can sort of take this where you want to take it from there, is firstly a new position stand came out from the American College of Sports Medicine on resistance training this year. And the last one was like 5 or 6 years old, so it's quite old. And probably one of the biggest takeaways from this new position stand, position stand is by the American College of Sports Medicine. They get to get like a dozen people with PhDs in strength science, and they read through like 100 systematic reviews. And then they say, okay, so this is the state of current scientific knowledge on this topic, right? Okay. So this is like an exhaustive list kind of position stand. And so probably the biggest takeaway is that from this stand is that the biggest benefit in terms of how much strength you gain, in terms of like health benefits like life extension and reduction of chronic disease, improved cognitive function, all that kind of stuff, comes from when you go from doing nothing to doing a little bit. So from that perspective, the routine that you do is better than the routine that you don't do. Even if the routine that you do kind of is suboptimal and it's not perfectly designed or whatever, it's like just doing something is way better than doing nothing. So if you're out there badly training your clients, like high five, because you're training your clients. Yep. And they're getting way more benefit than if you weren't training them. So good on you.
Yep.
So that's number one. But the second thing I think is that I think in Pilates especially, but even in physical therapy, and there's a lot of confusion about what strength means. And people use the word to mean different things. Sometimes people use it to mean endurance. Sometimes they use it to mean power. Sometimes they use it to mean strength in the technical definition. I think a lot of times in Pilates we don't actually know what we mean when we say the word strength, and so we say, oh, we're helping our clients get stronger, but if I said, okay, what does that mean? Yep. A lot of people I don't think would be super clear on that. And so I think that's where we get into all these debates about is Pilates strength training or whatever. It's like, well, first we have to just get clear on actually what it means to help someone get stronger.
Yep. Yeah, so the challenge with this kind of conversation I've found personally is almost like a lack of words to describe exactly what's happening. So, you know, you say, okay, well, potentially what we're doing in the rep range with like my method of reformer training, if we're pushing like 30 plus reps, you know, and then you would consider that potentially more endurance. And then the outcome, though, is still over time, clients can do the same duration with more resistance, if heavy is harder, or less support, body weight's the load. So there is like evidence there purely based on their performance that they have improved physically. And then you go to, what is that? Are they stronger now? Even though it's endurance range,
Yep.
Is it strength? So that's the part that I always find that I would appreciate a little bit more nuance on and how to describe it accurately, what the actual outcome is. I mean, is it just a increase in strength endurance? But then is that still strength? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So in the broad literature, we would define strength as your ability to exert force against an external object. So we measure like how heavy of a thing can you move, or how much, you don't even have to move it could be isometric, but how much force can you exert against an external object? And that's very easy to measure. We measure it in newtons or kilograms. And so that is just like the higher the number of newtons you can produce, the stronger you are.
Yep.
And so that is strength. But then within the category of what the ACSM would call muscle fitness, which broadly speaking kind of falls under the umbrella of strength, there's endurance, which is how long you can lift a submaximal amount for. So how many reps can you do at like 3/4 of your maximum, for example. And then there's power, which is like how fast you can move something of moderate load. Then there's speed. How fast can you move something light? So there's all these different, and then there's kind of like hybrid, like, speed endurance. And, so there's all of these kind of subcategories of muscle fitness. And broadly speaking, in terms of, there's a lot of crossover and overlap between all of these things. And broadly speaking, any of them that you improve, you're going to accrue a lot of the health and life extension benefits and a lot of the functional benefits. So it's not really to say that like pure strength is better than power or endurance, in terms of health or whatever. So that's one thing, is that the benefits kind of cross over. But obviously if you're sports specific, like if you're a speed or power athlete, then endurance is not going to be as good,
Yep.
And vice versa, right? If you're a marathon runner, power is not very important.
Yep.
So it becomes kind of sports specific depending on what outcome you're optimizing for. But in terms of like, there's also a lot of overlap between developing these capacities at a basic level, by which I mean, if you're relatively new to resistance training and you do any sort of resistance training, whether you're doing like 100 reps, or 2 reps with a really, really heavy load or whatever in between, you're going to develop you're going to get faster and more powerful and stronger and better endurance, like all of the above. And if you just keep doing that, you will keep improving all of those attributes up to a certain point. But then when you get to a certain level and you're sort of above, you're already in the above average category at this point. If you want to maximize strength, well, you have to lift really heavy things to maximize strength.
Mm-hmm.
But if you build up your endurance by doing 30 push-ups or 30 lunges or whatever, well, you're going to increase your muscle mass. And ultimately, that is going to increase strength. You're going to get stronger by doing that, but you're just not going to get as much stronger as you would if you lifted something very heavy, but you're going to get better endurance. So you're sort of biasing it more towards endurance, but you're still going to improve your strength.
Mm-hmm.
And in one way, kind of endurance kind of falls under the umbrella of strength training anyway. So in terms of like, what should we be doing with our clients? I think it's like, back to the ACSM point number 1, the routine they stick to and enjoy is the one that's going to give them the greatest benefit over the time, because the biggest benefit comes from doing nothing to doing something, right?
Yep.
So if we just keep them coming back, like we already won 80% of the battle,
Yep.
right? So we have to show them some kind of results over time in order for them to achieve. They have to look better, feel better, have more energy, not have sore knees when they walk upstairs, or be able to do this exercise they couldn't do before. And so you can do that with endurance, you can do it with power, you can do it with strength. Like there's no inherent benefit to maximizing strength. I mean, I think when you try and maximize anything, it sort of becomes a little bit obsessive.
Yep.
And you have to sacrifice other things in order to do it.
Yep.
And for some people, like elite athletes, that's a trade they're willing to make. But for most of our clients, they just want to show up a couple of times a week, get a bit toned, have more energy, look good in jeans.
Yep.
It's like anything's good. It's all going to work.
Definitely. Have you ever played those games, video games back in the day where you had must have been like a character, maybe it was an athlete or like on the game, and it had like a list of attributes, like speed, strength, endurance, power, acceleration?
Yeah.
I'd always love those games so much because I'd be trying to maximize the hell out of every attribute. I want these guys to be the fastest, strongest possible thing possible.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of the same approach to like training these clients. It's like I want them to be so fucking good, build them up in all the areas.
Well, you can build people up in multiple areas up to a point.
Yeah.
But no one's ever going to win the gold medal in the marathon and the powerlifting in the same, body.
Yeah.
Because they, to a certain extent, once you get to an elite level, and for most people, you can improve endurance and strength and power all at the same time. But once you get to a certain level, like probably competitive level, the more you maximize one, you actually have to decrease the other. Like there's no marathon runners winning powerlifting competitions because the sort of body that you need to win a marathon is kind of the opposite sort of a body you need to win a powerlifting competition. And so when you get really, really good at, to maximize your strength, you have to put on a lot of muscle mass, right? If you go and look at like someone winning a powerlifting or a Olympic weightlifting competition, they've all got muscles, right? And there's a very strong correlation. There was a study a few years back where they looked at the Wilks score of elite powerlifters, which is basically just their pound for pound strength rating, like irregardless of their body weight. It was like their relative strength relative to their body weight. What they found was there was almost perfect correlation between the amount of muscle mass and their Wilks score. And so what that says is that over time, someone who's more muscular is going to be stronger than someone who's less muscular. So anything you do to increase muscle mass is going to increase strength over time. And so you can't really kind of separate out those functionalities. But if you wanted to become really, really like a speed athlete, like if you look at elite mixed martial artists, right, they're not massively muscled because all of that extra muscle mass actually slows you down. There's more weight you have to move. And so it actually hinders you. And it hinders your endurance as well because you have to provide oxygen to all of that muscle mass.
Yep.
So, but for most of our clients, like I would say 90% of our clients, we can, increase all of their stats, at the same time. But I think often in Pilates, and I'm not necessarily talking about the way you teach Pilates, Nathan, but the world at large, we focus a lot more on moving very slowly. So we eliminate the speed and power development, which is really important, not just for athletes, but for everybody. Like if you're have an elderly client, their chance of falling and having a fracture is vastly decreased if they have increased muscle power because if you trip, which is how most falls occur, you can catch yourself on your leg and explosively decelerate, right? Like you catch yourself. That requires power, right? It requires speed and power. And so even elderly people, not elite athletes, like everyone needs speed and power. And speed and power are the things that decline the fastest. Like we say we lose strength and muscle mass. Actually, we lose speed and power much more quickly as we age. Everyone, will know that elderly people aren't as fast as younger people, right? Even more obviously, even the kind of fit, muscular elderly people are slower than fit, muscular younger people. And so speed and power is something we really need to work to preserve as we age. And so I think there's a real need for moving fast in with load in Pilates, but I think we neglect that a lot.
Yeah, that's right. If you talk about the purpose of training to kind of prepare your body for the real world, like obviously you have to move quick in the real world too. Yeah. And it's usually things that you're not anticipating. So, reacting to situations like getting out of the way of like a vehicle you didn't see or, an obstacle you didn't see or, someone kind of running into you and you have to kind of catch yourself, all those moments that require you, I think, to be ready. So you have to have the body that's capable. The muscle mass thing, I think, could be like a really good way to minimize the confusion because if the outcome of your training is you increase muscle mass, then you get all the benefits of that,
Right. And there's lots of research, like I said at the start, on the correlation between strength training and longevity and health and dementia and mental health, all that kind of stuff. And so we can look at three things when we look at that. We look at strength training volume, like how much strength training you do on an average week. Look at muscle mass, which is like a pretty good correlation between if you do more strength training, as long as you're doing it right, you're likely to have more muscle mass over time. And then the third thing is actual strength, like how much can you lift, right? And those three things are not exactly the same thing. Like you could do a lot of strength training but do it very badly, not put on a lot of muscle mass and not get much stronger, right? Or you could do strength training the way that, say, Olympic weightlifters do it, which is very, very low reps, staying away from failure, focusing more on the explosive power actually is what they develop. And so Olympic weightlifters, obviously they're much more muscular than the average person, but they're much less muscular than the average bodybuilder, say. And yet they can lift double or triple sometimes what a bodybuilder can lift. So strength and muscularity are not exactly the same thing. And so there's studies on looking at strength training volume, there's studies looking at muscle mass, and there's studies looking at strength as measured by how much you can leg press or whatever. And they all of those things correlate with improved lifespan, improved health span, improved quality of life. But of them all, strength, objectively measured strength, like how much can you leg press, for example, or how much can you squeeze on a hand dynamometer, that has the highest correlation with health, et cetera. So strength, muscle mass, resistance training volume. But muscle mass has a pretty high correlation. It's not a very big difference between muscle mass and strength. So I would say, and muscle mass is the easiest thing to train for because you can do 30 reps, you can do 5 reps, you get the same amount of muscle mass.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah. And plus, that's what makes you look good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I suppose the body composition is just the ratio between body fat and muscle mass.
Right.
And it's amazing how much more attractive everyone looks naturally when those ratios change, and you build the natural abilities that you already have, So I find that exciting that, we could potentially simplify it down to just increasing muscle mass because in these general populations, anything you're going to do is going to basically do that.
Anything. And if you're doing 30 reps or even maybe 35, 40 reps, getting pretty close to failure in that time, you are going to increase muscle mass exactly as much as if you did 5 or 10 reps. Like there's literally no difference in the outcomes in terms of muscle mass. And you're going to get, for the average person, like way more strength than you probably even thought you could develop, just by doing that, right? And so we don't need to maximize strength, and if realistically, if you truly want to maximize strength, you're going to run out of options on the reformer fairly quickly. Yeah. Because there's just not enough springs, and even when you get to body weight, there's not enough body weight. Yep. So I think you can bias for strength, as in like very high load, relatively low reps, like under 10 reps, to failure. When someone's relatively a beginner, because there's lots of stuff on the reformer that's really hard for a beginner. But as you get to be more experienced, you have to be going like a year or so pretty regularly and working pretty hard. It's like you're going to run out of springs, so you have to start increasing the reps, or you have to add some big ass dumbbells at some point.
Yep. Yeah. I think the systems that everyone kind of is creating to try and achieve these outcomes, like that's where the kind of the diversity in the market offerings are, because everyone has a unique take on how to try and get to the same point. I mean, I've definitely much different beliefs to a lot of people out there about the best way to get to it. But that's the magic. You can go out there and you can pick any experience you want. You can try them out, see what works for you.
Well, the main thing is the intensity, and when I say intensity, it means proximity to failure. Like you need to get to substantially improve muscle mass. You need to work within like 2 or 3 reps of failure where you literally cannot do another concentric, rep.
Yep.
And, you'll get like a non-zero amount of muscle growth if you go like 5 or 6 or 7 reps from failure, but it'll be vastly less. And if you go 10 reps from failure, you're basically just doing low intensity cardio.
Yep.
Which is what most Pilates is.
Yeah. Especially, if the spring doesn't change, you're doing some extended
2
flow.
2 years later, it's still 2 springs on footwork.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no change over time. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. All right. So I like it. So you bring extra nuance to that topic about, the improvements you can get. Technically, you are getting stronger, challenging the general population.
I mean, if we just got everyone in the world, all adults, to go to Pilates once a week for 50 minutes and just do 30 reps to failure once on each muscle group, like we would massively reduce the burden of chronic disease. We would extend people's lives by decades. Like this would be a major step forward for humanity.
Yep.
So forget optimizing the training. We just get them to show up and work hard.
Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
Well, that's I think from other posts I've seen you do, you went through like a list of things, which is kind of typical that a studio owner or instructor might be posting, and posting on the social media like, hey, I got a spot free Wednesday night. But all you're doing is hitting the same market, which is already committed. You're not kind of accessing the people that haven't come yet, and they're the ones that you really want to get to. So, so are you providing like a training for people how to do paid marketing to kind of bring in new clients? Is that something that you've created?
When I've got at the moment 22K followers on Instagram. When I do a post, it varies depending on who shares and whatever, but typically I'll get 1,000 people see a post, And so if you're a little Pilates studio and you've got 1,200 followers or whatever, you do a post, say I've got a free class on Wednesday night, it's 15 people are going to see that. And they're probably the people who are already your clients anyway, who already like your post, and that's why the algorithm shows it to them.
Yeah.
So it's you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, Mum, I've got a class on Wednesday and you want to come? Your mum's like, yeah, nah, I'm not coming. So I just think social media as a marketing tool for a local Pilates business is not a great thing because you're limited inherently by geography. And whereas for you and me, Nathan, our market is the whole English-speaking world, right? You're going on a tour of the US, the UK. I've got most of my clients are outside of Australia, UK and US predominantly, a bit of Europe. I've got a few in Australia too, but when your market is the whole English-speaking world, or at least the big 5 countries, Australia, Canada, US, UK, New Zealand, pretty much, then, Instagram's a great place to meet people and to introduce yourself to your market and stuff. But when your market is a 5-mile radius around, your studio, it's Instagram's not the best tool for that as an organic medium in most instances. And also because most studio owners, as you know, Nathan, because you've been doing it for years, to grow on Instagram, it doesn't mostly happen by accident. You have to have a deliberate strategy.
Yep.
It's work. It's a job.
That's right.
And most studio owners don't have a strategy and they're not that excited by posting on Instagram, and it shows.
Yeah.
And so to me, I just think it's basically a waste of time for most people. I think Instagram is really good as just a source of social credibility. If you found an ad for a studio or whatever, you'd probably go and do your due diligence and check them out on Instagram and see if they're legit and if, what it looks like.
Yep.
That's what I do anytime someone applies for a job with me. I'll check out their social media, etc. Or if I'm talking to a potential new client, I'll check out their Instagram, see what they're all about.
Yep.
But I'm not going to find that employee or that client or whatever. I'm not going to find them on Instagram. They might find me on Instagram because my market's the whole world. But so in terms of paid ads, I don't run a course on paid ads. I do coaching. I've got various programs I do with studio owners to coach them. And one of the things I help people with is paid ads, but I don't have we've got trainings inside. Actually, I do have a training, but I don't sell it as a standalone training. I share it just with people with people inside my program because I think the Pilates industry is in a really, really exciting place at the moment. It's growing just unbelievably fast and the speed of growth is accelerating, I think. And we're getting to a stage now where in a lot of places, Australia, a lot of parts of the US, some parts of the UK now, it's becoming quite saturated. I've got several clients in my mastermind where there's half a dozen Pilates studios within a 4-block radius, And so the good old days, 2019, when you could just open a Pilates studio and put a sign out the front saying Pilates and next day you're full. Those days aren't coming back anytime soon. And so, what worked in advertising 3 years ago, 2 years ago, doesn't work now. So I think there is no kind of real cookie cutter approach. And I've got some clients, like I said, in very high competition areas. I've got other clients opening up the first ever studio in some rural town in Nebraska or whatever. It's like
so good.
Yeah, it's like great. It's like put a handwritten sign up in the local supermarket notice board, and you're full the next day. And so I think there's a different strategy, for each studio. Of course, there's overlap, but I don't think there is one kind of cookie cutter strategy. But I think one thing you have to know, unless you just live in a microscopic small town where everyone knows everyone, you have to learn how to run paid ads. And it's like, you might fucking hate it. It might be boring. It's like, all that might be true, but it's like, well, do you hate making money?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you hate having clients? Yeah. It's just a necessary thing. But the thing about it is, if you are effective with it, then it's like a tap you turn on and off, like when you need it. It's pretty cool.
I'd post every day on Instagram. I don't think I've missed a day since 3-4 months. I post even days I don't feel like it, I still post. And I also run ads, and I tell you what's easier. The ads are just you want to reach twice as many people, you just double the budget.
Yep.
Easy.
Yeah, and then you got all the metrics, all the data to look at, and then you're optimizing. Yeah. Very good. Now, another thing I was really interested in is you're talking about previously kind of held beliefs about loading the spine, being straight or in flexion and things like that, and pretty much everyone, you could say, has like an aversion or a fear that, if you load the spine in a flex position, then you're going to be doing some kind of damage. But from the posts I've seen you do recently about that, that's completely the other way around.
Well, it's interesting. Whenever I do a post on that topic, there's a couple of other topics that get the same response, like spinal stabilization, like cueing, like the deep abdominals and stuff like that. A couple of other topics, but this is one of the classics. I get comments, like I did a post on this a couple of weeks back. I think it's up at like several hundred comments already. And the comments fall into 3 baskets. And basket 1 is like, yes, amazing, love this post, thanks so much. Basket 2 is like, this is bullshit. No one says that. Like, no one in Pilates is saying don't flex your spine. I teach my clients to flex your spine. You don't even know Pilates. What the fuck are you doing? Go and learn Pilates. Right? And then basket 3 is like, oh, this is so bullshit because neutral spine is so important and we should never flex. Right? And so group 2 and group 3 are directly contradicting each other because group 3 is saying, you should never flex, and group 2 is saying, like, no one says that.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting. And I get it with the core activation thing and spinal stability and a couple of other things as well. Pelvic tilt. I did one on pelvic tilt.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
No one in Pilates teaches pelvic tilt, and then there's right under that, there's a comment going, yes, pelvic tilt is so important,
Yeah.
So this is something very interesting to me because of my academic kind of background in exercise science and physiology and stuff. And I've just been really interested in biomechanics for a long time. And around the year 2000 and the kind of the decade after that, I was very much into neutral spine. I've got lots of photos of me teaching clients there. I've got neutral spine. I've got testimonials from clients who, I saved, like, hallelujah, Jesus saved me, But I'm not saying I'm Jesus, but like I was saved, this client says, by, Raph taught me neutral spine and now I can walk again, sort of thing. And I was basing that on kind of on research that I was reading at the time. But since then, there's been a lot more research come out that has basically just, I guess, shown a more nuanced position. So what we used to think, what I used to think, and what Pilates, I think, still thinks, apart from the people who say Pilates doesn't think it, is that there's something special about neutral spine, like it's somehow like safer or more efficient or stronger, or it somehow optimizes your ability to activate particular muscles correctly or something. Like there's some kind of special thing about neutral that's different to any other particular position, you know. That's just not true. Like there's just like no evidence for it. You know, it's just neutral is it's not even a position, it's a zone. And the biomechanical definition of neutral is the mid-range of any joint where the ligaments around the joint are all lax, right? So ligaments are bands of connective tissue that join bone to bone. They say they're attached, you know, from one vertebra to the next vertebra in your spine. And there you got them in your elbow, your fingers, everywhere.
Yep.
And there's ligaments on the back that as you bend forward, those ligaments get tight. They stop you bending too far forward. Like you don't want to bend like
a slinky.
You don't want to be like don't want to bend like 90 degrees at your L45, right? So there's a ligament there to limit the range of motion, right?
Yep.
And there's a ligament on the front that stops you bending too far backwards, one on the right that stops you bending too far to the left, and so on and so forth, right? So it just stops you from falling into a puddle on the floor and keeps you relatively structured.
Yep.
Right? And so as you bend forward, the ligaments on the back get tight, and as you bend backward, the ligaments in the front get tight. And when you're in the middle, neither of them are tight, right? And so there's about a roughly 10 degree range of motion around the midpoint of the joint where none of the ligaments are tight, right? And that 10 degree range is called the neutral zone, right? And that is actually, interestingly, it's where there is the least stability to the joint because all of the ligaments are lax, right? So there's the least ligamentous support in the neutral zone. Now, does that mean it's dangerous? No, it's perfectly safe. There's nothing wrong with neutral, right? But it's not more stable. It's actually less stable mechanically, right? So, yeah, there's just nothing special about neutral. Now, there's nothing wrong with being in neutral, nothing wrong with teaching people to be in neutral. It's like fine. It's nothing wrong with it at all. There's nothing special about it either, and I just think there's no particular reason to teach. Why would we teach someone – I mean, why would I teach someone 17 degrees of flexion? Just seems like a random thing to teach people. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with it, right? But it's like, well, why do we teach them 0 degrees of flexion? What's special about that? You know? And we have interesting literature now and in several areas. So the reason that we think neutral, or we thought neutral was, you know, better, we thought it was safer. We thought it was more stable. We talk about the stability thing. It's actually less stable. From a purely biomechanical standpoint, we thought it was strongest. We thought it was most efficient. Okay, so when we look at those in order, like all of those are not true. Right? Wow. We look at the pain thing, right? So neutral protects you against injuries or pain. It's like, no, there's no evidence that people with sore backs have worse posture. In fact, there's the opposite. People with sore backs tend to stay straighter when they lift. If you look at imagine somebody with a really sore back, imagine them doing up their shoes. What do you imagine them bending like a cat? No, you imagine them like staying stiff like a board and kind of like bracing and like, you know, getting down on one knee. And so people with sore backs actually move with more rigid neutral spines. Yeah. People with no back pain, they tend to slump and slouch and bend, you know, just like a normal person. Yep. We look at the strength thing. Actually, as you bend forward, there's very good biomechanical literature in cadavers on this, and also in actual living people. This is a pretty clear biomechanical finding. As you bend forward, and then you go to pick something up, like you're picking up something heavy off the floor. If you do it with a rounded back, your ligaments on the posterior side, the back side of your vertebrae, and also all the fascia sheets back there, become tight. Right? And it turns out that ligaments are way stronger than muscles, right? Yep. And so you actually can produce more force when you flex because you actually tighten up those ligaments, and it's like pulling on a steel cable as opposed to like a flex band, which would be the muscle, the contractile tissue. And so at around 90% of your maximum spinal flexion, you are substantially stronger, as in you can deadlift more, right? Than in a neutral spine where you're just using the muscle force because the spine is much less stable because you're not tightening those ligaments.
Yep.
So it's more efficient, requires less effort. I mean, you can think about this as well. All right, so imagine you have to pick up a coffee cup or a pen off the floor, right? Imagine you have to keep your spine neutral to do that. So you stand up tall, you're neutral, get your hips under your shoulders, you bring your ribs in, everything's perfect. Okay, now lock that in, brace it in that position, keep your spine neutral, pick up the pen. Okay, that's going to require a lot of effort, right? Whereas if I just said like, hey, just bend over like a normal person, pick up the pen, way easier, right? So it's more efficient. Now, the definition of efficiency is how much input versus how much output, right?
Yep.
If it's more effort to do the same task, it's less efficient. That's what efficiency is, right? So neutral spine is not safer. There's no evidence that people with, who bend when they lift or whatever get more back injuries or anything like that. It's not associated with less pain. In fact, it's associated with more pain. I don't think that's what causes the pain, but I think it's part of the cycle. It's not stronger. It's not more efficient. It's not more stable. Right? Now, it's not bad. There's nothing wrong with neutral, right? It's like, what's all the fuss about?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Wow. There you go. That's awesome. I love it. And I know that you're talking about there's natural variation in like the structure of people's hips, and then trying to use those points to determine like that to me, because obviously the body is not symmetrical. The body is like highly asymmetrical, and then that's just in one body. And then you look at your variations between all the humans, and I mean, it's incredible the differences between all of us anyway. The idea that everyone would have the same points on their hips to kind of be able to find these things, I mean, you think about it, it's laughable, really.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's laughable when you contrast it, because I think it's one of those things that's not immediately obvious. It's not obvious until you kind of see it, and then it's like, oh yeah, how could I have not seen that? But before you see it, it's not obvious. And so I was always under the impression for years and years that skeletal structure is kind of like this immutable thing. Like if you have a structural scoliosis, like a sideways curvature of the spine, it's not something you can just fix with exercise or whatever. Or if you've got a leg length difference, it's because one thigh bone is longer than the other. It's like there's no exercise that's going to fix that. So it's kind of immutable in that sense. And so it's like, okay, well, if your bone is higher, that's got to mean that your pelvis is in the wrong spot, you know. So it kind of made sense to me for a long time. But now the more I've thought about it, and I've read the research obviously now showing that we do have different shaped pelvises and different shaped femurs and different shaped hip sockets, whatever. It's like I think about it, and I think about like way back in the early 20th century when we had this kind of, what was it called, eugenics or something, where we'd measure someone's like head circumference and go, oh yeah, you must be dumb because your head circumference is this, amount. Or it's like the distance between people's eyes would indicate how trustworthy they were, or, that kind of like crazy, what we'd now think of as just ridiculous, what idiot would believe that?
Yeah.
Right? Oh, Nathan's head is X number of centimetres, therefore his IQ must be this much.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we're just literally doing the exact same thing with your pelvis. Oh, your bone's at this point, therefore you've got this muscle balance. It's like, well, no. It's like, are people's heads different shapes? Yes. Are their eyes different distances apart? Are their ears different heights? Are their cheekbones different? Of course.
Yeah.
Of course they are. So why would their pelvises all be identical?
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, look, any people, dear listener, that you know in your life, right? Loved ones, family, whatever, like put your hand next to their hand, right? They have different length fingers, different width of your palm, different circumference of your finger. Like some people's fingers are more straight, some people's are more wavy. Sometimes the middle finger is a bit longer, sometimes the first finger is a little bit long. Like people's hands are very different, right? Why would their pelvises be all identical?
Yeah.
Look at people's feet. Why do we have like 10 different shoe sizes available and different widths of shoes? Why do we have like regular suit jackets and then tall suit jackets? People have different length spines.
Yep.
It's like the evidence is just everywhere that people are different sizes and shapes, right? And if you've got someone who's 6'4", 300 pounds, and someone who's like 5'1", 125 pounds, we think of those two people died, we looked at their skeletons, they would look the same. I don't think they would.
No.
Right? No. So it just seems ludicrous the more you think about it.
Yeah.
That if we go, oh, your bony landmark is here and your bony landmark is there, therefore this one's wrong, and this one's correct. It's just a meaningless exercise.
Yep.
Yeah. And the science backs that up, that when scientists get, like and I hope your listeners will forgive me here, just go into slight digression, or not digression, but just like nerd out here for a second on the anatomy, is that neutral pelvis, okay, as we're taught in the Pilates land, which came from Kendall et al., Muscles, Testing and Function with Posture and Pain, which was first published in, I think, 1947 or 49 or something, way back mid-20th century. They defined neutral pelvis as when the ASIS, the front pokiated bit on the front of the hip bones, and the symphysis pubis were aligned vertically, right? So symphysis pubis and your ASIS are directly in line, like neither one is in front or behind the other. That's neutral. And the idea was that when you are in neutral, then the PSIS, the pokiated bit at the back of your pelvis next to the sacroiliac joint, would be at the same height as the ASIS. Now, when I was taught in Strength Pilates, I was taught on a female it should be 1 to 2 centimetres higher, and on a male it should be level in neutral. Turns out that's not true. But when scientists actually get cadaver pelvises and they put them in a jig, that puts them in a perfect neutral with the ASIS and the symphysis pubis perfectly aligned, okay? Then they measure the height of the PSIS. They find there's a massive variation of up to 23 degrees in how high the PSIS when all of those pelvises are in a textbook neutral with the symphysis pubis lined up with the ASIS, right? And they also find differences up to like 11 millimetres in the heights of the iliac crests, even when the pelvis, like the ASIS are perfectly level, okay? They'll have one iliac crest higher. So the test I was taught, a lot of us were taught, you feel the iliac crest, oh, this one's higher, therefore your pelvis is hiked on the left side or the right side or whatever it might be. No, maybe that side of the pelvis is just bigger. Like, has anyone ever got like one ear bigger than the other, one foot bigger than the other, one hand bigger than the other? Like, it's like, of course, one eye bigger than the other. Like, we all have these weird asymmetries all over our body, right? Yep. It's like, why would the pelvis be different? Like there's the average person, can't remember if it was left or the right ASIS, 10 degrees forward of the left ASIS, just structurally, like it's actually a pokier, outier bone, And so when you're palpating, oh, this side's a bit further forward, so your pelvis is rotated. Probably not. It's probably that's just the shape of the bones, just filling their normal variation in their human shape,
Yep.
So yeah, anyway, they're just normal variation and we pathologize it. And, another study that I really love, they looked at 120 pain-free people and measured their pelvic alignment. And they found 75% of women and 85% of men had an anterior pelvic tilt, right? And it's like, all right, well, so if 80% of people, pain-free people, yeah, 80% of pain-free people have it, is it a tilt or is it just that's a normal shape of the pelvis? Like 80% of people are above average,
Yeah. Yeah, it just sit with that for a moment. You know what I mean? It's crazy, isn't it? Because that's the pervasive language. That's the standard speak out there. The standard kind of thought processes. But when you take just a little bit of a look into it, it just doesn't make sense at all.
Well, I think in Pilates, and like there are so many other disciplines in which people do this. I think physiotherapy did this for years. Other disciplines, osteopathy, chiropractic's classic for it, massage, naturopathy, so many disciplines do this. I think it's almost universal. I think, let's just say humans do it.
Yeah. Is
we make up dysfunctions that we can then fix with our special method.
Yeah.
And so we gift somebody, oh, congratulations, you've got anterior pelvic tilt, or your spine's unstable, or what you've got a hypolordosis, or your glutes don't fire properly, or whatever. But don't worry, we can fix it. Yeah. If you just come twice a week for the
like
next
a special
5 years,
mechanic.
Yeah. But it's like the thing is though, we don't need to make up these bullshit fairy tale, things that don't exist. We can just help people get stronger. Like we have a genuine thing that we can help people with, which is to fucking live longer.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing finer that you can gift somebody, in my opinion. So it's like we don't need to make up stupid, make-believe, pathologies like anterior pelvic tilt or glutes not firing properly. Like there's a genuine pathology, which is people aren't exercising enough. They're not strong. They're not confident in their bodies. We can fix that. We actually can fix it. It's a real thing, and we can actually fix it. So let's just do that.
Yeah,
let's
just do that really well. Yeah. No, it's awesome. It's awesome. It's really refreshing. It's almost like when you kind of look at these things in more detail, it's almost like a bushfire, and it just burns everything away, and it's like rejuvenating, like the freshness that comes out of it, the new openness, the new focus on actually what is important, because it's so easy to get bogged down in all these kind of like things, because it's all like second person, third person information bouncing around. And you got people debating it without ever having read any literature themselves, just because someone else said it and someone else said it.
Yeah. And that was me like 15 years ago, And so no shade on anyone out there if that's what you currently believe or have believed or whatever. It's like, yeah, we've all been there. And you have to trust people. When I went to Pilates certification, that's what I was taught. It's like, why wouldn't I believe that these people are the teachers? They've got a textbook. It seemed legit. And I think they genuinely believed what they were teaching me. They just didn't know any better, which is a bit shameful really, because as an educator, I think it is incumbent. I think you actually have an obligation to actually fact check and learn what you're teaching if it actually is true. But I think it reminds me of that meme, sort of like the idiot savant meme, sort of like, there's the village idiot who's got this very simplistic view of like, oh, why don't we just help people get stronger, And then there's this like journeyman who's like, knows a little bit, and they're like, oh no, we've got to fix their anterior pelvic tilt and correct their muscle activation, their pelvic and their lordosis and their tibial torsion and their blah, 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 blah. And then there's the Jedi master who's like, why don't we help people get stronger?
Yeah. I can see why these ideas, they can be kind of, it's kind of like this, they sound technical enough to be true. So it's easier to believe because it feels like it has credibility. And then if it comes from a credible source, you think, well, it must be, Right. Why else would they be talking about it if it wasn't important?
Yeah. And I 100% agree with that. And I think, the thing is with credible sources, you shouldn't, dear listener, you shouldn't trust anyone. You shouldn't trust me. Like in this episode, I haven't cited any specific research papers. And so don't take what I say here as gospel. If you want to, look at one of the 350 plus episodes of my podcast where I've talked about these topics repeatedly, and I do have a crap ton of scientific citations on each of those episodes. And so it doesn't matter who says it. I think you should always look for, if someone's making a claim about something about exercise science or strength or pelvic tilt or pain or stability or something, it should be a totally normal thing to ask them, well, how do you know that? How do you know that's true? Because I've known lots of things that were true that turned out to be not true. And so you have to be able to ask that question. And I think it's a massive red flag if someone doesn't want you to ask that question.
Yep.
How do you know that?
Yep. That's right. Yep. Now, just before we came on air today, I was talking to Raph about one of his posts. He was saying that it seems like a common practice that that new instructors get overloaded by trying to learn how to do everything, trying to do like 100 things, but not doing any of them very well. And I think that reminds me of that, must have been a quote from Bruce Lee maybe. It's like, don't fear the guy who has done 10,000 kicks, fear the guy who's done one kick 10,000 times. And I thought it was so funny because that is the same philosophy I've got when it comes to like training a new trainer. So rather like I'll do like a general kind of workshop induction about like the loading principles and about the philosophy and some of the method, like the teaching method. But as soon as that's done, which takes about less than an hour, then we just focus on teaching one exercise. We do it like 10 or 15 times, and we do it right before a practice teaching session, and then they just teach that exercise 3-4 classes in a row. And then next week we do the same process again, just add another exercise until eventually they're doing the whole warm-up, and then doing a third of the class, half the class. And then so you get that contact time and you get the reps in, and it's very like if you look at the time you practiced it versus the time you get to use it, it's literally, we did it like 8 times in a row, and now you're teaching it right now. So that that post you have on that, I just could not agree more with that, because it just is very, very effective at skill acquisition, because you're just getting to action everything straight away.
Yeah. I think it's not a coincidence that you liked that, because I think it's just that reflects a reality about how humans learn. You know, it's like no one is going to learn better by trying to memorize 1,000 things at the same time. Like that's not how the human brain works. So anybody who's taught a lot and experimented with different methods of, you know, speeds of progression and different ways of training people, eventually you have to figure this out. You know, that it's better when you drip feed things to people and get them doing a lot of reps of something very basic, and then get them to implement that, and then keep cycling on that until they nailed it, and then you move on to the next thing.
Yep.
You know, and if you read the scientific literature, that's what it says as well. But it's like the scientific literature is just literally people did trial and error experiments and figured out what worked, and that was it.
Yeah.
You know, but I think that in Pilates we mistake often breadth for depth, and we think like, okay, if you know 500 exercises and you're comprehensively trained, that makes you a good instructor. It's like, well, knowing an exercise is not a binary. It's not like a 0 or a 1. You either don't know it or you do know it. It's like, well, how well do you know it? You know, okay, you can do it, but can you cue it? Can you cue it to someone who doesn't know those anatomical terms? Can you cue it to someone who's never been on a reformer before? What do you do if someone can't do it on the spring setting that you gave it? You know, how do you know what that looks like?
Yep.
You know, and how many more springs do you take off or add on based on what you see? And like all of these things are things that it just takes time to learn, you know. And I think the example I used in a podcast recently with Heath was my daughter's she's 19 and she's become sort of mildly obsessed with baking sourdough bread.
Oh, nice.
And so she watched a couple of TikTok videos, learned how to make sourdough starter, and just did it all herself. And the first couple of loaves, you know, didn't turn out perfect, but they were edible. And then after, you know, 3 or 4 loaves, she started to get the hang of it. But then she sort of started to overcorrect, and then she undercorrected, and then she, you know, and so after her like 20th or 30th loaf, it's now like perfect every time.
Yep.
But you just have to go on that journey of reps, you know, to encounter those kind of weird situations where like it was a little bit different, you know, the fridge was on a different temperature or the humidity was different that day or the whatever. And you just have to learn how to incorporate all of those little variations into the way that you use the skill. And that you just have to do reps. Like there's no substitute for reps in learning. And if you're learning 500 things, you do 1 rep of each thing. It's like you don't get enough airtime.
Yep.
That's the Bruce Lee thing, right? You need more reps. And so I think it's kind of backwards the way people in Pilates broadly, you know, view quality. They say, oh, you know, all our instructors are comprehensively certified with 500 hours of training. It's like, yeah, but what did they do in those 500 hours? You know, like, if they spent 500 hours learning to teach footwork, I'd be like, fuck, I bet this person's really fucking good. You know? Yeah. But if they've learned 500 exercises and spent 1 hour on each of them, including learning how to do it themselves, I'd be like, yeah, they probably know nothing. Because there's no way they remember them all.
Yeah.
Like if they get to number 500, there's no way you remember number 1 or number 17, right? So I think, you know, simply listing all of the things that you've supposedly, in quotes, learned it's not only kind of misses the point, I think it's kind of flips the point. It's like literally the more breadth you learn, the less depth you can learn because we've only got so much capacity. And so if my daughter had done 1 loaf of sourdough, then done a salad, then done a chicken Kiev, then, you know, practiced flambe and crepe Suzettes, it's like she would be shit at all of those things, you know. Whereas she's done like 50, 60 loaves of sourdough now. She's really fucking good. She could sell it.
Yeah.
You know, she could sell it. And it's like every time she puts a loaf in the oven, I know it's going to turn out it's like exactly perfect. And she brought 2 loaves out the other day and she was like, oh, which one do you think's the good one? I'm like, they're both perfect. Like she's like, no, this one's better. I'm like, yeah, they both look fucking perfect to me. Like, and so she's now at the point where it's like, you know, this one's like 0.25% better in her mind because of something that's like, dude, they're both like top 1%. Awesome. Yeah, loads. But that's what comes from just lots of reps with introspection and feedback and looking at TikTok and going, oh, mine doesn't look like hers, and then why did it turn out this way? And then just trying to figure it all out and getting really good at doing a narrow range of things. And then she can start to branch out and add in. She did a fruit and nut loaf, and the first one kind of sucked because it made it too heavy and it didn't rise at the right. But then she figured out, if I use these different fruit and nuts and I fold it in this different way and I put it on this different temperature, it's like after 5 or 6 attempts, she's nailed it, right?
Yep.
And then she's like, oh, what if I made crackers? And what if I, and so now she's done a chocolate loaf and she's done all these kinds of different loaves.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that that's the equivalent in Pilates of if we're teaching footwork and now we've come across someone, someone had a knee replacement or someone had a sore back or someone had never done Pilates before or somebody, was really strong and had been squatting double their body weight at the gym or, like now we've faced all of those situations, we've figured out how to solve each of those, and now somebody else comes in we've never seen before. But it's like we've seen every other darn thing, so we can just figure it out on the fly because there's nothing can surprise us at this point. We've just done the reps, If I said to my daughter, hey, do a loaf with cinnamon and apple, she'd be like, yeah, bam, probably turned out perfect first time because she's done enough reps now. She just knows, what it's meant to look like, feel like, smell like, taste like.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's where the confidence comes from, because you've got the experience to back it up, and then you can predict. You'd be able to kind of anticipate and predict success in the future based on what you've done in the past. So you're walking into environments where there's like not many things that you wouldn't be aware of that you wouldn't be able to handle. So maybe one of the reasons why new instructors feel a little bit stressed is because they're trying to learn 500 things and not doing anything well. Just strip it right back to what's the one, because you can only teach one exercise at a time, right? That's why I always get fires me up. It's like there's no point getting fancy with stuff. You know what I mean? Like being a great teacher isn't really about knowing all these exercises. It's about how well are the clients doing the exercise you gave them. That's what makes you good. So being fucking awesome at teaching the fundamental basic exercises sets them up to be able to do everything else. So if you can't teach them how to do a lunge or a chest press or a plank, then that's the fucking problem, because that's the thing they have to be good at first. It's like the prerequisite to every other exercise. It's like you unlock exercises based on building the core attributes to be able to handle the different variations. Yeah. So when I'm teaching an instructor, I'll be getting them to look at, all right, they've just given the movement cue, everyone's moving. I'd stand there on the side of the room with them at a vantage point and I'd be like, all right, cool. How many people are moving exactly the way you intended? So we're looking at speed of movement, range of motion, body position, springs, and coordination. Is everything exactly the way you wanted? And you might go, oh, okay, we're doing footwork. You said you wanted toes in the bar, but see, there's 3 people with the heels in the bar. So pre-cue that. They're like, okay, cool. So they're already starting to get the feedback loop from the environment, and they know that if we've got 18 people in the room, 18 out of 18 have to get it before you do anything else. Otherwise, there's no point. Yeah. So that's kind of like an internal metric. And you want that to be internalized within them, because that means you're building autonomy, and they're going to be awesome when you're not there.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly the way we teach as well. The first thing is you've got to just say the words to get people into the position. Second thing is you've got to look and see, like, are they actually doing, what I ask them to do? Like, are the heels or toes or whatever it might be? The third thing is that we teach, and I'm pretty sure you teach some version of this as well, is like, well, are they at the right level of challenge? Right? Does this person need an extra spring? Does this person need to move faster or smaller range of motion or whatever? Do we need to put foot bar down for this person? And then the fifth thing, or the next thing, I forgot what number we're up to, but the next thing is we progress it. Yep. Right? So everybody's there, everybody's with it, everybody's working, great, next level.
Yep.
And I think we often confuse this, and I certainly made this mistake as a relatively young instructor, is we feel like we need to entertain the clients by giving this constant stream of novelty in exercise selection. Mm-hmm. But we're actually, like, as a lifelong exerciser, and dear listener, you're probably in this basket as well. If you love Pilates, you probably do a lot of Pilates and you probably do a lot of exercise and running and weights or whatever you do. Is like the joy in the activity. People, and there's research on this as well in terms of behavior change. People usually start an activity for extrinsic reasons. So they want to lose weight, they want to look better, they want to, fit into their dress so they fit into high school or whatever it is. Okay, but that doesn't keep you going 5 years later, right? People keep going 5 years later because of the intrinsic joy of the activity. It feels good to do it, right? Just regardless of the result you get, it's just you like doing it. And it becomes inherently rewarding to do it well, right? Anybody got good at anything is because you found an inherent reward in improving it at doing that thing. Like it just feels like it's not good because it just is good, right? That's the end.
Yep.
And so when you exercise and you get stronger, that is inherently rewarding, right? If you can do 6 push-ups and last week you could only do 5, like that is not fucking boring.
Yep.
That is really fucking exciting. Like people get really excited about that. And when you get to when you do 30 push-ups and 40 push-ups, it's like, fuck yeah, I'm like a super being now. And so like I think we don't give people credit, our clients credit, for like people can be very motivated by very simple routines as long as they're progressing, as long as they're getting better at doing the thing. They don't need a lot of variety most of the time.
Yep. And part of that is the education of like them understanding how they're improving. Like if they're doing the same exercise in a different spring setting, which is technically harder, a lot of the times they wouldn't understand why is like the lighter spring harder in this exercise. Why is the heavier spring harder? It's based on the loading, like if we change the body position to stretch the spring more, why is that harder? So being able to kind of say, all right, everyone, who wants an extra challenge? Yep. Everyone's like, no. You're like, yes, let's go. All right, everyone, if you want an extra challenge, next time you push your arms straight, let's lift the hips, And the reason that's harder is you stretch the springs more, it gives you more resistance. So, okay, cool. So it's not just do this. It's like, okay, there's context, like if you do it, this will happen. And then there's also, why is it harder? So you do that enough, all the clients just know everything. So by the time you're teaching like a intermediate/advanced class, they pretty much have almost like an instructor level understanding. And it also means they know how to cheat. So then you have to like watch that. Be like, hey, where are your feet over there, But it brings a lot of joy because you're focusing on such small details,
Yeah. I think it's funny that the like you say, the small details, like when you understand the relationships between the equipment settings, your foot bar setting, how far you're pulling the ropes, where your foot is on the carriage, whatever, spring choices, and the load, right? And how you can manipulate all of those different things to apply more or less load in very, very fine increments to somebody. Like you say, when you lift up to your knees in a chest press or arms in straps facing the foot bar, like why is that harder? Well, there's a balance challenge. Obviously, you've got a smaller base of support and a longer lever, but predominantly, like you say, you're higher up, so you're pulling the ropes further, which stretches the springs further, which increases resistance on the springs. So it's harder on your shoulder muscles. Yeah. It's not just harder on your balance on your core. I mean, you know all of this back to front, but when you understand that as an instructor, like small little details like move your foot 2 inches forwards or drop your foot bar 1 rung or come up to kneeling, can make a massive difference to the client's level of challenge. And that's where, even though we're not focusing, hopefully, on anterior pelvic tilt or muscle activation or your lordotic curve or whatever, small little details in alignment and equipment setting and positioning do make a big difference. And it is important to focus on these things. Yep. And so what I'm advocating, and I know what you're advocating, Nathan, is not just like free for all, no one gives a fuck about alignment or whatever. It's like couldn't be further from the truth. No, yeah. But it's like we're trying to set people up in their body position, their equipment settings, etc., to maximize load on the body part we're trying to load within the client's capacity, so that they're right at the level of right at the limit of their current level of ability. And that requires a deep understanding of how the equipment functions, their body mass, their height, how that relates to it, and looking at their technique to be able to figure out, okay, is this easy, medium, or hard for this person based on what I'm seeing? Yep. And so all of that's super important, and alignment is really important for that, and details are really important, but just not for the reasons that we probably used to think about muscle activation and posture and blah, blah, blah.
That's it. The purpose of form, I believe, is to guarantee the target muscle group is getting loaded.
That's why we're here. Yeah. That's how you get stronger.
You know what I mean? So like if you're doing an exercise to work your abdominals, you don't want to be loading your lower back. Your form is dictating where the load is being directed.
Not that there's anything wrong with loading the lower back, but if you're trying to load the abs, let's load the abs. Yep. And when we load the lower back, let's not load the abs, let's load the lower back.
That's right. That's right. So you're setting an intention and you're getting the outcome. So the form is like the physical way to guide the load to that point, So that's why it's so important that the form is right. But the understanding of the instructors to be able to kind of always be aware of that. That's also important because coming back to that point we made earlier about being really good at one thing at a time and then expanding that. A part of the process, for example, like if we're going to teach a lunge, it'd be looking at, all right, this name, springs, props, body position, move. Once you got them to the move part, which is the movement cue, what we're looking at is how they're moving, like what positions are they in. And you're looking for things which are like high probability that aren't going to be working. Like you've got the foot in the wrong position, the springs are wrong, they've got their knee resting on the carriage when you didn't want that, the coordination's off, maybe they're going too deep into it, turning it into like a hip flexor stretch instead of loading up the front leg. And obviously there's like so many different ways that people teach a lunge and there's so many different beliefs about what you're trying to do with it. So just to quantify mine, let's say we're doing body weight lunge, so less tension's harder. It kind of looks like a single leg deadlift. You're kind of hinging at the hips, leaning forward, loading up the front leg, so your glutes on the standing leg are loaded. And then as you stand up, carriage comes in. So you're targeting your butt on the standing leg basically.
And the carriage is there just really to support the back leg and stop you falling over.
That's right. So if you were to put your knee on the carriage, then you're loading up the hip flexor on the inside leg and you're taking the weight off the target muscle group. So you're not going to get anything out of it. So when you're training that new instructor...
Well, it's going to be a nice gentle hip flexor stretch.
Yeah. It's not what we wanted. No gentle stretching. No. So that the measurable, basically the target muscle group's the reference point of every exercise. So if the experience you're meant to be getting is already dictated by what the target muscle group is. Yeah. So if you are getting a light hip flexor stretch when we're going to be targeting the glutes, then obviously it's not the right outcome. You know what I mean? Not acceptable. If you wanted to stretch the hip flexors, obviously, go for it. But basically in every exercise, there's like a probability of what will go wrong because once you've seen it like 10,000 times, you kind of get like a little bit of a list of like, oh no, well, this is probably going to happen. So being able to let the instructors know exactly what to look for, they can anticipate the things then so they find them faster. And then they teach them how to fix it in advance. So then when it happens, they can just fix it straight away. Obviously this stuff is exciting because you can really accelerate the learning of an instructor and the confidence by just letting them master one thing at a time rather than trying to overload them with so much stuff.
I think like in getting into the lunge again, and I'm not sure how much time we get, so cut me off if we need to stop here. But like with the lunge, if your goal is to load the glutes, which I think is a fine goal for a lunge, I would add adductor magnus, like the main adductor on the inside of the front leg, the glute leg. That's also going to work anytime you work those glutes in deep hip flexion. Like you're going to work the adductors as well. And of course the quads, a little bit on the front leg. You're not going to avoid working those, but all right, point taken. The things that are going to enhance that are, there's going to be like a list of half a dozen things. It's like, all right, well, you got to have your weight on the front leg, not the back leg. That's thing number one.
Yeah.
And if you hinge forwards more at the hip, you're going to go into more deep hip flexion, which is going to load those hip extensor muscles, the glutes and the adductors more. So if you hinge your torso forwards over the front leg. If you keep the knee back behind the toes, it's going to load the hip more, the knee less. Now, dear listener, there's no rule that says you can't lunge with your knee forward of your toes in. Like, I'm all for lunging with your knee forward of your toes. If you've got a reason for doing it, like you want to load the quads more or whatever, fine. It's perfectly safe, perfectly healthy, nothing wrong with it. But if your goal is to load the glutes, you're going to facilitate that more by keeping your knee back and your shin more vertical and hinging at the hip more rather than at the ankle and the knee more, because that's going to load the hip more. And if your goal is to load the hip, well, let's load the hip. And then if you want to take, once your body's hinged forward, if you want to take your hands forwards overhead, that's going to lengthen the lever and put more load on the hip. If you want to have a couple of 2 kilo dumbbells in your hands, it's going to add even more to that. Okay, so we can go more and more and more. And then at the other side of the body, the more springs we have on the carriage there, the easier it is. We're going to deload that front leg because the carriage now becomes a support. The more we lean our knee or our foot or whatever on the back carriage, the easier it is. So ultimately we would want to have our knee off the carriage, 0 or a very light spring on, and 100 or 99% of the weight on the front foot.
Yeah.
And in order to keep the spring as light as possible, whatever spring we've got, we want to have the front foot, the grounded foot, forward far enough so that as you lunge down, the carriage doesn't get pushed out very far because the further you push it out, the more it tensions the spring. And so all of these things, if we put them together, it's like, okay, front foot is at the base of the foot bar a little bit in front. Your weight's all on the front leg. Shin is pretty vertical. You're hinging forward at the hips, chest forwards, arms reach above your head, back knee off the carriage, half a spring or zero spring or a quarter spring. Like, no one in the world is not going to work their glutes if you do that. Right?
That's it. You don't get a choice.
Now, you may or may not feel it in the moment, but you're going to feel it tomorrow morning when you wake up.
If you stay there for 3 minutes, you'll feel it. Yeah. Everyone hits the wall at some point.
Yeah.
That burning sensation basically is that fatigue setting in.
Yeah.
And if you're feeling it in the target muscle group area, then you know you've done it right.
Yeah. And how do you know all that? How do I know all that? Well, you have to have done fucking 10,000 lunges, right? And gone, oh, when I lean forward, that hurts my glutes more. You know, when I put my knee on the carriage, that hurts my glutes less. You know, like you know that. And then also just understanding some basic biomechanics about, you know, what I said about loading the hip and loading the knee and all of that kind of stuff, and just thinking through the equipment settings like you talk about all the time. It's like, okay, well, in this, like you said, there's a bodyweight lunge, so less springs is harder, so therefore more springs is easier, so therefore more tension on the springs is easier, so therefore I want to have my foot further forwards to reduce the tension on the spring, right? And if I really wanted to do it, I'd have no spring on, or I'd keep my back leg bent and I actually wouldn't push the carriage out I'll just do a squat with my foot resting on the carriage, but I wouldn't push the carriage out, you know? So, yeah, all of those basically just come from reps, basically.
Yeah, that's right. So the interesting thing about this is, like, you know, you might, if there was a comment section here, maybe there is a comment section somewhere on Spotify, I haven't had a look at that yet. No doubt someone in the comment section will say, oh, that's not a lunge. Yeah, well, in the method you learned it in, it's not called that. But in the method that I've created, or the method you've created, we call it whatever we want to call it. You know what I mean? And it's like whoever does your method will learn your exercise names and spring levels and systems for the purpose of achieving the outcomes that were set by you or by the course. So to argue about like something as trivial as what it's called, it's really open to interpretation, really. Like it's called whatever it's what you want to call it. And if you have a system behind it, then basically rather than kind of arguing about what it should be called, it's irrelevant. It's more about
what are you trying to achieve by it?
Yeah.
Right? Is it a hip flexor stretch? Is it a quad workout? Is it a glute workout? Like, what's it for?
Yeah.
And if you can tell me what it's for, I can look at it and go, okay, I can tell whether it's doing that or not.
That's right.
And therefore, are you achieving your objective? Whether it's called a lunge or not, who gives a shit?
That's right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
That's it. That's just for the simplicity of like group understanding, you know, it has to have a name.
right. I mean, when you say lunge, I just think, okay, 1 foot forward, 1 foot's back, and we're going up and down in some manner. Right?
That's it. That's it.
And whether your knees forwards are back, your hips forwards are back, your toes are forwards are back, your springs are high or low. It's like, yeah, there's 50 different ways we could do that would each achieve a slightly different outcome.
Yep.
And I think what people, by and large, struggle with, what I used to struggle with, what I see students struggling with at the early stages of our program, is they see the movement, but they don't really understand what it's for. And they just think, okay, I'm doing a lunge, a lunge is a lunge is a lunge is a lunge is a lunge. It's like, nah. Depends on all of those things that we just listed out about positions and springs and settings. And you could totally change that lunge. Like if you put on 2 full springs and put your knee on the carriage, it's like that becomes a completely different exercise. You're not even working the front leg hardly at all. It's more about the back leg now. And so like you can completely change the exercise just by changing a couple of small things about the position, or if you let them lean on their knee on the front leg, which is a common one that clients will try and do. It's like, or lean on the foot bar or whatever. It's like, yeah, so it's, and then you think, oh, we did a killer glute workout today. It's like, yeah, no, not so much, you know?
Yeah. Like one of the worst things as an instructor you could ever hear is, oh, I didn't really feel that. And that's because the body position wasn't right or something in the movement pattern wasn't right. And that's something
or you didn't have the right load on for that person.
That's right. So that's something that you want to kind of eliminate hearing at all. You always want to be able to kind of have your finger on the pulse and be like, okay, cool. Because when you watch the speed of movement, range of motion, you can tell by all those things like what they're actually feeling to do it. So you can make those changes. But you always want to get to a point where you can guarantee every single person's getting the experience you intended. So if you want them to feel the glutes on the front leg, that's what they got to get. And then you got to make the changes until everyone gets it. Yeah. One more thing I really want to cover with you is you had like a real viral post, it must have been a couple months back, where you brought together like all these different books, and you're just kind of going through how the philosophy and the people that are kind of creating the rules and the definitions of what Pilates is and isn't changed over time. And I couldn't believe how like systematic it was. It was like, this group kind of got into power and they decided that that's not a part of it now. And every new group that came through were like, that's not right, you know. Can you run us through really quickly, just like a short version of that?
Yeah, this is something I find fascinating. It's basically, I call it Pilates through the ages, the history of Pilates. And so Pilates was invented by a guy called Joseph Pilates, and he didn't call it Pilates, he called it contrology, the art of control. And he wrote a book in 1940, which he published in 1945, called Return to Life Through Contrology, where he laid out 34 exercises all on the mat. And so his system was very vigorous. It was based on kind of early 20th century, late 19th century medical gymnastics. Like think about if you went into the army in 1920 and you did like your physical like exercises, like imagine toe touches and star jumps and those types of things that you would do, that type of thing. And so he never mentioned, like things that he never mentioned at all that are like we take as for granted in Pilates, like activating individual muscles. Whole book, in Return to Life Through Contrology, he gives very specific instructions on how to do every single exercise, never once mentions a muscle. No muscles. In fact, he specifically says in the book, Pilates or Contrology is not merely for the development of this or that pet set of muscles, but for the uniform development of the body as a whole, right? Mm. So he's against targeting, this or that muscle. It's for the whole body development.
Yep.
He doesn't mention neutral spine, not once. It's not a thing. Doesn't have the concept, right? So he in fact specifically says when you're lying on your back, you should press your low back flat to the mat, right? So we should flatten our spine, which is not neutral. It's the opposite of neutral, spinal flexion. So then we get to the classical era. Joseph died in 1967, and sort of the next person to kind of take up the mantle of the lead of Pilates was Romana Krasnowska, one of his students. And there was many other of his students who were just as senior as Romana, but for political reasons, she was kind of put in charge. She was kind of more, had a bigger personality, I think. So she was put in charge of Pilates at Joe's old studio, and she was a prima ballerina with the New York Ballet, right? And so this is where the classical era of Pilates came in, which was called the classical because she was a classical dancer, right? So she took all these things out of classical dance, like foot positions, first position, second position, the V, the wide foots on the footwork positions that we have, they're all out of classical dance. And this is a hug a tree, this is just like first and second position in ballet, right? So all of these, the rond de jambe and développé with the leg, all of the ballet terms, that came from that era. And she changed the system, fairly substantial, like added more exercises to it, modified the technique for certain exercises, changed the cueing, changed like quite substantial changes to the system, and made it much more balletic. So it was much less medical gymnastics and much more like dance now. Mm. And then the people that Romana trained, they became their instructors in their own right in the like 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and that was called the contemporary era of Pilates because they were contemporary dancers, most of them, right? And so they introduced stuff, that generation was like Moira Stott / Merrithew and Rael Iskowitz with Bassi and Brent Anderson. He wasn't a dancer, he was a physiotherapist, but, with Polestar and that kind of generation. And they introduced biomechanics and principles and physiotherapy principles at the time. So that's where we introduced, like in Stop Pilates, I was never taught, actually the principles of Pilates, control, centering, precision, breath, flowing movement, blah, blah, blah. That was introduced after Joseph died. He never mentioned those in any of his books, right? They were introduced in about 1980, so kind of in the classical era, in a book by Friedman and Eisen. And then in the 1990s and 2000s, in the contemporary era with Maurice Stott and the Polestar stuff, they introduced, instead of the 6 principles of flow and precision and blah, 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 they introduced biomechanical principles. So the principles that I learned in Stop Pilates were pelvic placement, breathing, thoracic and rib cage placement, scapular stability and mobility, and cervical placement, right? So no mention of precision or control or flowing movement, or it was all about the scapula should sit flat and flush on the rib cage, blah, blah, blah. So it was all about biomechanical principles, and that's where we introduced neutral spine. And we went from flatten your spine fully on the mat to neutral or a very slight imprint, which is like a baby flexion. Then we went to activate your transversus abdominis. So a lot of those contemporary systems are big on that sort of deep muscle activation. So we went from Joseph, never cue muscles, work in flexion, we don't have any principles, okay, to like now we've got these 6 principles, to now work in neutral, to cue muscles. Like it's literally opposite.
Wow.
You know, and the contemporary people introduced lots of partial moves. So like the prep move for the 100 or the rollover, whatever it might be. And then that became like in your first lesson with Joseph, we used to have this video we show our students. First lesson with Joseph, like never done Pilates before, you're just some random person off the street, completely untrained. You're doing the 100, you're doing the rollover, like these full-on moves, and Joseph's like whacking you on the head with a stick and telling you, go harder. Not literally whacking you with a stick, but he was pretty forceful. And then you fast forward to like 2001 with Stop Pilates, and it's like your first lesson, you barely get to move. You literally just sit there, you have to focus on your breathing and expand your ribs this way and that way, and you have to focus on your pelvic floor and your transverse abdomen. You've never actually like exert any muscular force at any point. And so it's gone like from this like very vigorous, exercise form from Joseph to this like essentially the opposite of that, very, very cerebral, thinking about your muscles, thinking about your alignment, thinking about your awareness of each muscle.
It's like mystical kind of.
Yeah. And then now we're getting into this fitness, we're well into the thick of the fitness Pilates, era, where it's about like what we've been talking about, targeting muscle groups and bringing people near failure and improving strength and all of that. And so a lot of this fitness stuff, I mean, a lot of people are still doing neutral spine. A lot of them aren't, so it's kind of a bit mixed bag. Some people are using dumbbells. Some people think that's not real Pilates, so on and so forth. Some people are on megaformers. Some people think that's not real Pilates. And at each generation, they look at the next generation and go, oh, the kids these days, back in my day, we had to walk to school 12 miles through the snow, bare feet. It's like these kids these days, they don't understand Pilates. Back in my day, we understood Pilates because we used to do neutral spine. It's like, yeah, but the people when you were a kid, they were like, oh, these kids these days with their neutral spine, like, oh, for fuck's sake. Flat back was good enough for us, like what's wrong with these people? What's the biomechanical principles? Oh, what's wrong with flow and control and precision and all of that? And Joseph would have been like, what's all these newfangled principles? Flow and control and precision. Like, why are you doing all this? Like, isn't my method good enough as I wrote it? You know? And so every generation, there's just like resistance to the next generation. I remember in like 2017, 18 or something, I was in the Pilates Alliance of Australasia on the board there. And I remember they had this brand new crazy franchise called KX Pilates, which I'm not sure if you've heard of them or not. And KX, they had like some crazy number, like 20 locations or something in Australia at the time. It was pretty small. And the board and the PAA were like, oh my goodness, it's so dangerous. Like, oh, the group exercise, they're so badly trained, injuries, blah, blah, blah. It's not real Pilates. It's like, just fear. It's just fear about the next new thing. And now, funnily enough, I see on social media, not specifically KX people, but all of the people of that generation who've been teaching group reform for a decade now, like, oh, the new instructors these days, it's dangerous. They don't know what they're doing. They're not trained properly. It's the injuries. Blah, blah, blah. And the people who are these days who are trained, in 10 years, they're going to be saying exactly the same freaking thing about whatever the next generation is. It's like, just get over yourselves, people. Like, move with the times.
Yeah, well, it just seems that people's kind of attention span is only limited to like a decade or slightly before, but they might not realise that it's actually changed so much from what it originally was. But in saying that, as long as everyone is creating good experiences for their clients, I think that's the main thing. And the whole judgment thing's a bit like unnecessary. But
I think there's a place for everybody. Teach contemporary, awesome. Get them moving. Like I said right at the start, the biggest benefit goes from doing nothing to doing a little bit even badly, right? Yep. So you just get people moving. If they enjoy doing classical, contemporary, contrology, fitness, dumbbells, megaformer, whatever, like it's all good. And if you want to really maximize the benefit, sure, there is some biomechanics and exercise science principles we can apply to maximize the benefit, but doing something is just way better than doing nothing. So it's like we're all in this together, and it's like we should all just like be applauding each other. And sure, we can help each other improve if we want to get better at targeting the glutes, is the best way to do it, right? But if you don't want to target the glutes, fine. You know, if your clients come along and breathe and think about their pelvic floor for an hour, well, it's way better than sitting on the couch drinking a glass of wine and scrolling.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, it's all good.
It's all good. Thank you, Raph. Thank you so much for coming in again, mate.
Yeah, thank you.